Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, June 6, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, the weather today features a high of 82.7 degrees and a low of 60.5 degrees, making for a comfortable day to get outside. We will look at the legal reasoning behind a federal judge's decision to block an immigration freeze ordered by the Trump administration, and we will examine how a new daily treatment is providing hope by doubling survival times for individuals battling pancreatic cancer. Beyond these major headlines, we will also bring you updates on several other stories from around the globe. There is a lot to get through this morning, so stick around as we dive into all the news you need to know. We have a full program ahead, so please stay tuned. We're starting this morning with a major federal court ruling that could reshape immigration policy for millions of people. A judge in Rhode Island has just struck down one of the Trump administration's most sweeping immigration directives. For more, we're joined by our reporter, Ethan. Ethan, good morning. Walk us through what happened.
Good morning, Grace. Yesterday, June 5th, U.S. District Chief Judge John McConnell Jr. issued a landmark ruling vacating a policy that had effectively frozen legal immigration pathways for nationals from 39 countries. The case is called Dorcas International Institute of Rhode Island versus USCIS. In a 135-page decision, Judge McConnell called the administration's actions, quote, arbitrary and capricious, end quote. He also said the agency leaned on, quote, pretextual, end quote, national security concerns to justify the freeze.
That's a strong word, pretextual. What exactly was this policy doing on the ground?
It had a formal name, the hold and review of all pending asylum applications and all USCIS benefit applications filed by aliens from high-risk countries. According to PBS NewsHour and the Indiana Lawyer, it was rolled out through two USCIS policy memoranda, one dated December 2nd of last year and another January 1st of this year. In practical terms, the government paused final decisions on asylum claims, work permits, green cards, and citizenship applications. Judge McConnell said that left millions of immigrants in what he described as, quote, indeterminate legal limbo, end quote.
And what triggered all of this in the first place?
The administration pointed to a shooting on November 26th of last year, just over 6 months ago, during the Thanksgiving holiday weekend in Washington, D.C. An Afghan national, Rahmanullah Lakanwal, allegedly shot 2 National Guard members. Within days, the administration designated 39 countries as, quote, high risk, end quote, and began the adjudication pause. The countries span Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and even Oceania.
But the judge clearly didn't buy that national security rationale. Why not?
He found USCIS hadn't provided the, quote, reasoned explanations, end quote, that the law requires for such a drastic policy shift. According to PBS NewsHour, the judge wrote that the agency claimed statutory authority it simply doesn't have. He also said the government ignored the, quote, reliance interests, end quote, of applicants who had followed every legal requirement. And he saw the national security framing as a cover for what he called, quote, anti-immigrant sentiments, end quote.
Let's dig into that shooting for a moment, because the Washington Post has done some reporting that complicates the administration's story.
That's right. Lakanwal originally entered the U.S. in 2021 under the Biden administration's Operation Allies Welcome. But here's the key detail. He was revetted under the second Trump administration. In April of 2025, just 7 months before the shooting, Trump's own USCIS formally granted Lakanwal asylum. So critics argue the current administration's vetting protocols cleared him, which undercuts the claim that this was a failure of past policies.
And he's just one person from one country. How did that justify freezing applications from 38 others?
That was central to Judge McConnell's reasoning. As of this month, there's no official evidence from the Department of Homeland Security tying Lakanwal to any of the other 38 countries. The judge said there was no, quote, rational connection, end quote, between a shooting by one Afghan national and freezing applications for, say, a researcher from Nigeria or a physician from Eritrea. That disconnect was a major part of why the policy was struck down.
Give us a sense of the scope here. Which countries are we actually talking about?
It's a very wide net. On the African continent, we're talking about Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Côte d'Ivoire, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Gabon, the Gambia, Malawi, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Tanzania, Togo, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. In Asia and the Middle East, the list includes Afghanistan, Burma, also known as Myanmar, Iran, Laos, Libya, Syria, Turkmenistan, Yemen, and the Palestinian Authority, and then Antigua and Barbuda, Cuba, Dominica, Haiti, Venezuela, and Tonga round out the list.
That's an extraordinary range. Does the ruling cover every kind of asylum case?
It does not. The ruling specifically affects applications handled by USCIS, what are called affirmative asylum claims, filed by people already inside the United States. It does not touch defensive asylum cases, which are handled by immigration judges for people stopped at the border. So this is really about the millions waiting in the queue, not those in active removal proceedings. Still, the practical impact for those families is enormous.
Speaking of impact, what are advocates saying this morning?
They're calling it a major victory. Skye Perryman, the president and CEO of Democracy Forward, said the ruling reaffirms that the federal government cannot shut down lawful immigration pathways or discriminate based on country of origin. She said the policies caused, quote, enormous harm to families, workers, and asylum seekers, end quote, who couldn't work or access basic protections. Jamal Abdi, president of the National Iranian American Council, said it sets a precedent that the administration can't ignore laws set by Congress. And Sean Van Diver of #AfghanEvac called it a significant win for Afghan allies who followed every legal requirement.
How is the administration responding?
Pretty defiantly. As of this morning, the Department of Justice hasn't officially filed an appeal yet, but DHS legal counsel James Percival has already labeled the judge's decision, quote, sabotage, end quote. Legal analysts from ABC News and CNN expect the DOJ to seek an emergency stay from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit within the coming days. That would aim to keep the freeze in place while the appeal moves forward.
So if the appeal doesn't succeed quickly, what changes right now for people caught in the backlog?
For now, the hold and review policy is unenforceable nationwide. USCIS is legally required to resume processing asylum, green card, and citizenship applications for nationals of those 39 countries. That's millions of people who've been waiting since late 2025. Many of them couldn't renew work permits, couldn't travel, and couldn't move forward with their lives.
And what's the broader legal significance here, beyond just this one policy?
It's a real check on executive power in the immigration space. Judge McConnell essentially told the administration it can't invoke national security as a magic phrase to bypass administrative law. The agency still has to explain itself, weigh the costs to the people affected, and show a rational link between the threat and the remedy. That reasoning could shape how future immigration directives are written and defended in court.
Is there any indication of how the First Circuit might lean on the emergency stay request?
It's hard to predict, but the 135-page opinion gives the First Circuit a lot of factual findings to work with. Judges reviewing an emergency stay typically look at the likelihood of success on appeal and the harm to both sides. Advocates will argue that families have already suffered months of harm, while the government will press the national security angle. We should know within days which way the court leans.
Before we let you go, Ethan, what should our listeners watch for in the next few days?
3 things, really. First, whether the DOJ files that emergency stay with the First Circuit and how quickly the court responds. Second, whether USCIS issues guidance to its field offices on resuming adjudications, because that operational piece matters enormously. And third, whether Congress weighs in, since some lawmakers have signaled they want hearings on the original vetting of Lacanwal and the broader policy design. Any of those could reshape the story by the end of next week.
Really helpful context this morning. Ethan, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us.
Always a pleasure, Grace.
And now to a medical breakthrough that has the oncology world buzzing this weekend. An experimental pill is nearly doubling survival time for patients with advanced pancreatic cancer. Here to walk us through it is our health reporter, Chloe. Chloe, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this is one of the most striking cancer announcements we've seen in years. The results were presented at the American Society of Clinical Oncology, or ASCO, 2026 annual meeting in Chicago. They were also published simultaneously in the New England Journal of Medicine. And, according to Reuters, by way of the Straits Times, the data drew an actual standing ovation from the room.
Wow, a standing ovation at a medical conference. What's the name of the drug, and what exactly did it do?
The drug is called daraxonrasib, also known as RMC6236. It's a once-daily pill, which is itself a big deal for these patients. In the Phase 3 trial, patients taking it lived a median of 13.2 months, compared to just 6.7 months on standard chemotherapy. That's essentially a doubling of survival time, and Healthline and Enclave are calling it practice-changing.
That's a remarkable jump. Tell us about the trial itself and who was enrolled.
The trial is called RSolute 302. It enrolled 500 patients with metastatic pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, the most common and deadly form. All of these patients had already failed one round of standard chemotherapy, so they were running out of options. Half got the new pill, half got more chemo, and researchers tracked them closely for survival and tumor response.
And beyond just living longer, did the drug actually shrink tumors?
It did, and significantly. In the overall trial population, 31.6% of patients saw their tumors shrink or disappear on daraxonrasib compared to only 11.2% on chemotherapy. Among patients with a specific mutation called RAS-G12, the response rate climbed to 33.2%. Progression-free survival also doubled, from 3.6 months on chemo to 7.2 months on the pill. And the overall risk of death dropped by 60%.
Let's back up for our viewers. Why has pancreatic cancer been so impossible to treat until now?
Great question. About 92% of pancreatic cancers are driven by mutations in something called the RAS gene, specifically KRAS. For decades, scientists called RAS undruggable, because the protein has a smooth surface with no obvious place for a drug to grab onto. As The Guardian and Science Daily explain, daraxonrasib is the first in a new class called RAS-on multi-selective inhibitors. It uses what's called a tri-complex mechanism to finally crack that code.
Tri-complex mechanism. That sounds complicated. Can you break that down?
Sure. Older drugs only targeted the off state of one specific mutation, KRAS G12C. This new pill binds to a common cellular protein called cyclophilin A, and that creates a kind of hook. The hook then latches onto the active on state of multiple RAS mutations, including G12D, G12V, and G12R. So it shuts down the growth signals across a much broader range of cancers.
Okay, but a powerful drug like this usually comes with side effects. What are patients dealing with?
They are, and this is worth being honest about. According to Targeted Oncology and Enclave, 86.3% of patients developed a rash. Others had diarrhea, nausea, and stomatitis, which is mouth sores. 43.6% experienced severe or life-threatening side effects, which sounds alarming. But here's the surprising part. Only 1.2% of patients on the pill dropped out due to side effects.
Only 1.2%? That seems incredibly low, given how rough the side effects sound.
It is striking, especially compared to 11.2% who dropped out of the chemotherapy arm. Dr. Jennifer Knox and other experts at ASCO credited a few things. 36.1% of patients had their doses reduced, which let them stay on the drug. The skin and mouth issues were manageable with supportive care, unlike the deep exhaustion of chemo. And frankly, when your life expectancy doubles, you're motivated to push through.
That makes sense. Did patients also feel better day to day, or just live longer?
Both, actually. Healthline reported that daraxonrasib significantly delayed what's called time to deterioration, meaning quality of life and pain. Patients on the pill didn't hit a major pain milestone until 9.2 months into treatment, compared to just 3.8 months on chemo. So they're not only living longer, they're feeling reasonably well for more of that time. That's a meaningful distinction for families making end-of-life decisions.
Let's talk access. When can patients actually get this drug?
The manufacturer is Revolution Medicines, and they began a rolling new drug application back in April of 2026, about 2 months ago. ABC News and NPR report it's benefiting from the FDA Commissioner's National Priority Voucher, a pilot program designed to fast-track breakthrough treatments. And on May 1st, just about 5 weeks ago, the FDA granted expanded access. That means U.S. physicians can already prescribe it to eligible patients before full commercial approval.
So some patients are getting it right now. When do we expect formal approval?
Analysts cited by Biopharma Dive and PharmaForum expect a final FDA decision by late third quarter or early fourth quarter of this year. A full commercial launch is expected by the end of 2026. That's an extraordinarily fast timeline, but it reflects both the strength of the data and the desperate need in this patient population.
And I understand the research isn't stopping with pancreatic cancer. What's next?
Revolution Medicines is moving aggressively on several fronts. A Phase 3 trial called Resolute 303 started enrolling patients in April, testing the drug as a first-line pancreatic treatment, both alone and combined with chemotherapy. There's also a lung cancer trial called Resolve 301, comparing it to docetaxel, with early data showing an 85% disease control rate. And in colorectal cancer, combining daraxonrasib with cetuximab is producing 30 to 35% response rates in KRAS mutant patients.
That's a lot of fronts. But I imagine not everyone is celebrating without reservations. Are there skeptics?
There are, and their concerns deserve airtime. Dr. Vinay Prasad and other clinical skeptics, as covered by Oncology News Central, have raised something called patient disappointment bias. 15% of patients randomized to the chemotherapy arm declined treatment, compared to only 3% in the daraxonrasib arm. The worry is that the trial may have compared the healthiest experimental patients against a potentially sicker or less motivated control group.
That's an important nuance. Anything else the critics are flagging?
Yes, some are questioning whether the survival benefit was boosted by superior care patients received after the trial ended, because the overall survival gain was actually larger than the progression-free survival gain. And there's a shadow from a 2025 PNAS paper retraction involving preclinical daraxonrasib data due to data falsification at Wayne State University. That retraction did not involve this Phase 3 human trial, but it has fueled calls for independent verification of the 13.2-month survival figure in the real world.
Let's put this in context. How big is the pancreatic cancer problem in the U.S. right now?
The numbers are heartbreaking, Grace. The American Cancer Society estimates that 68,000 Americans will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer this year alone. About 53,000 are expected to die from it. The 5-year survival rate for metastatic patients is a dismal 3%. So even a partial improvement matters, and a doubling of survival time is genuinely historic.
How are the researchers and company leaders framing what this means for patients and families?
Dr. Mark Goldsmith, the CEO of Revolution Medicines, told Healthline that these results represent, quote, a potentially transformative advance, end quote, that could soon establish a new standard of care. Doctors at ASCO echoed that sentiment, calling it a grand slam moment in a field that has been starved for good news. For families who've lost loved ones to this disease, the hope is that within months, daraxonrasib becomes a standard offering at cancer centers across the country.
And realistically, what should patients or families watching right now do with this information?
The most important step is talking to an oncologist about whether expanded access applies. Eligible patients with previously treated metastatic pancreatic cancer can potentially get the drug now, ahead of approval. Beyond that, watch for the FDA decision later this year. And keep an eye on those follow-up trials in lung and colorectal cancer, because the real story here may be even bigger than one disease.
Truly remarkable reporting, Chloe. Thank you so much for breaking this down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace. It's a rare day when we get to share unambiguously hopeful news in cancer care, and this is one of them.
Here are some other headlines. A shaky peace is already falling to pieces in the Middle East. Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon have claimed the lives of 9 people, including 3 members of the Lebanese military. A brigadier general, a captain, and a soldier were caught in the crossfire on the road between Nabatea and Marjayoun, while a separate strike in the village of Saksakia claimed 6 others. Despite a fresh United States-brokered ceasefire, things are heating up, with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun calling the strikes a flagrant violation of sovereignty. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam is begging regional powers to stop using the country as a bargaining chip, but with Hezbollah rejecting the deal and demanding a full Israeli withdrawal, it seems the olive branch has been snapped in two. Moving to South America, Peruvians are heading to the polls tomorrow, June 7, 2026, to pick their 10th president in just 10 years. Talk about a revolving door at the palace. It is a high-stakes runoff between the conservative Keiko Fujimori and leftist Congressman Roberto Sanchez. Voters are hungry for a bite out of a dramatic surge in crime and extortion. The winner will take the reins from interim President José María Balcázar, who stepped in following the removal of José Chiri. This election is also a double-decker event, as the country restores a bicameral legislature, electing a Senate and a Chamber of Deputies for the first time since the early 1990s. Analysts say the economy is at a tipping point, and the world is watching to see which way the pendulum swings. In the world of tech, is it time to pull the plug? The safety firm Anthropic is suggesting a coordinated, industry-wide pause in the development of frontier artificial intelligence. In a move that is anything but robotic, co-founder Jack Clark and Marina Favaro warn that AI systems are nearing a threshold of recursive self-improvement, where models could develop their own successors without a human hand on the wheel. They are calling for a multilateral agreement with independent verification, much like nuclear arms control. While OpenAI thinks democratic governments should set the pace of innovation, and critics like Gary Marcus think it is just a bit of strategic rhetoric before an initial public offering, former Senator Mitt Romney says these safeguards are an urgent national priority. It was a bit of a tight squeeze for 5 astronauts on the International Space Station after a leak in the Zvezda module began to gas out. NASA ordered Jessica Meyer, Jack Hathaway, Chris Williams, Sophie Adnot, and Andrei Fedyaev to seek shelter in a docked SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft for a 2-hour safe haven procedure. The air leak had doubled to 2 pounds a day, making it a truly high-pressure situation. Repairs by Russian cosmonauts are on hold for now, but with a retirement date set for 2030, the aging orbital laboratory is definitely feeling the puncture of time. Finally, in the race for the Golden State, Xavier Becerra is moving one step closer to the governor's mansion. The former Secretary of Health and Human Services has officially punched his ticket to the November general election, holding over 26.7% of the vote. While he waits to see who he will face to succeed Gavin Newsom, Republican Steve Hilton and Democrat Tom Steyer are in a neck-and-neck race for that second spot. If Becerra wins, he would be the first elected Latino governor in 150 years, showing that when it comes to California politics, he certainly has the golden touch. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.